Today on The Way of Ramen, we're taking another shot at a Tonkotsu Gyokai Tsukemen. I got this idea from talking to a subscriber who just happens to live on the same island as me. So we spent the day together cooking this and it turned out really good. So yeah, it's a good one. So for the soup, we're using about 4 pounds of pork femur, 1.5 pounds of chicken feet, and a small piece of beef tendon. For the chicken feet, you want to make sure that you cut off the toenails before using them. This step is optional, and some might say not recommended for this style, but we pre-boiled our pork bones. This makes the soup cleaner, but for this style, people generally like a darker color and a little bit of funk, so skip this step if you want a darker soup. We pre-boiled the bones for about 30 minutes and then skimmed off the scum and then rinsed and cleaned off the bones. After rinsing, we added the pork bones, beef tendon, and chicken feet into a pressure cooker and covered it with water. And then we set it on high pressure and cooked it for 1 hour. We did this outside because sometimes cooking pork bones can get pretty smelly, so if you can, you should probably do this outside. While the soup was cooking, we started our tare. This tare is based off the tori paitan tare I did in one of my previous videos. We started off with 32 grams of niboshi, and then we added 15 grams of kombu, 10 grams of katsuobushi, we probably should have used 25 grams but I ran out, 15 grams of ginger, and a few cloves of garlic cut in half. For shoyu, we're using Usukuchi Shoyu and Koikuchi Shoyu. It's really worth your time to try to find good Japanese shoyu as it really makes a huge difference. We're actually mixing 2 types of Usukuchi Shoyu here because I didn't want to use my really expensive one. So we're using a combined total of Usukuchi Shoyu of 550 mils and also 90 mils of Koikuchi Shoyu. We're also going to add 110 mils of mirin and 110 mils of sake, and this all goes into a pot. Got the shoyu onto the stove, and then we added all of our dry ingredients into the pot. I also forgot to add some dried shiitake mushrooms, so I'm just gonna throw them in here. Then we're gonna just bring this up to a simmer and then take it off the heat and let it steep overnight on the counter. We also got a Dashi Stock started to add to the soup later. We weighed out 14 grams of niboshi and 5 grams of kombu. And then we're gonna add this to 700 milliliters of water. And then we're just gonna let this steep on the counter until we're ready to add it to our soup. After 1 hour of pressure cooking, we did a quick release and made a huge mess outside. And when we opened it, this is what our soup looked like after 1 hour of pressure cooking. We're gonna just mix this up with a spoon, try to get it all broken down a little bit more, and then we set it for 1 more hour of cooking on high pressure. While the soup was pressure cooking for the 2nd hour, we started our noodles. I didn't film the whole process, but I'll throw the ratios up on the screen now. We did a 40% hydration noodle with 90% bread flour and a 10% whole wheat flour mix. For kansui, we did majority sodium carbonate and less potassium carbonate to get more chew for the noodles. These noodles turned out really great, and even though I couldn't cut them as thick as I wanted to because they don't have the right attachment, they still matched really well as a tsukemen style noodle. Next, I prepped the aromatics for the soup. I cut up an onion, some green onions, a small carrot that I picked at my dad's house, and a bulb of garlic. After the 2nd hour pressure cooking, we did another quick release, and when the pressure nipple went down, we opened it up and gave the soup another good stir to try to break down the bones and the chicken feet a little bit more. At this point, we also threw in all of our aromatics that we had cut up earlier, and we also threw in a half a potato that I had diced up. I forgot to film that, but the potato is actually really important for this soup. With all the aromatics in, we put the lid back on and set it for the final hour of pressure cooking, 1 more hour at high pressure. During that time, we finished up our dashi stock on the stove. We just got it heated up to about 180 degrees for about 10 to 15 minutes and then set it on the side. After the last hour of pressure cooking, we did another quick release, and then we took the soup inside the house and started to strain it out. The point of this step is to pull out anything like onion peels and, more importantly, the big hard pork bones that you aren't going to be able to blend with an immersion blender. We're basically going to strain out the soup in a sieve, pull out any things like the onion peels and the pork bones, and then dump all this stuff back into the soup for blending. If you see any marrow in the pork bones, be sure to use a chopstick or some kind of stick to get that out and back into the soup, because there's a lot of flavor in there and you want all of that flavor in the soup. Once all the large pork bones were removed, we blended everything together with an immersion blender, and this gave us a super thick, creamy tonkotsu soup. It looked really good and it tasted actually really good at this point too. We got the blended soup back onto the stove, and then we added in our dashi stock and the niboshi. We removed the kombu, but the fish went in there. And then we just simmered and reduced this for about 30 minutes, constantly stirring the bottom of the pot to make sure that nothing sticks there. And at the end of that, it looked like this. The last step that we did was we strained out the soup one last time, this time trying to get out all the sediment that's still kind of floating around in the soup, the blended up bones and things. This step takes a long time to do. The soup drains very slowly out of the sieve, but at the end you're gonna end up with a clump of sediment in the sieve, and you just wanna try to make sure that you squeeze out any soup that's possible. So take your time with this step. It's gonna take a while, but it's gonna be worth it. And after our final straining, our soup looked like this. Super rich, super creamy, really porky and fishy, just great stuff. We got this cooled down quickly and then stored in the fridge overnight. The next day, the soup had firmed up and it was pretty much hard like a tire, which is what you're actually looking for. I scooped out some of the soup just to check it, and it was still perfectly emulsified. By far the nicest tonkotsu that I've ever done so far. The tare had a chance to rest and sleep overnight, so now I'm just going to strain this out and our tare will be done. So now all that's left is to prep some toppings and things that are going to go into the bowl. I'm going to grind up some katsuobushi here to make what's called gyofun, or fish powder. If you have a small blender or a spice grinder, feel free to use that. Next I'm going to zest up some lemon. I don't have any yuzu, which is what you would normally use, so I'm just going to use lemon here. I'm gonna thinly slice up some green onions here, or do my best to do so. A lot of ramen nerds actually judge people on how thinly they can slice green onions for some reason. I don't know why, but I'm trying to get better at it because I know that that's a thing. This is some leftover pork shoulder chashu that I had for my EAK video that I recently did. It's not the best chashu, but it's gonna be okay for this one. So all that's left to do now is heat up the soup and boil the noodles. I got 2 servings of soup heated up in a small pot. And I also measured out 2 servings of noodles and got them into boiling water and then cooked them for 3 minutes. So for tsukemen style noodles, you need to cool down the noodles in running water, and don't do it like I did right here by pouring all the water into a shallow straining bowl, because I almost lost half of our noodles here, but luckily I was able to save most of them. But what you basically want to do is rinse off the excess starch from the noodles so they don't stick together in the bowl. So rinse them a few times, drain the water, and then take some of the noodles into your hand and lay them out as nicely as you can into the bowl. Obviously I'm not very good at this yet, but that's okay. I'm still learning and I'll get better if I keep practicing. Finally, to serve, get 20 milliliters of tare into a heated bowl with 200 milliliters of hot soup. Add your gyofun, fish powder, green onions, and a tiny bit of lemon zest. Add some sliced chashu and nori to your noodle bowl, and that is a serving of Tonkotsu Gyokai Tsukemen. This turned out really well, but I think there's still some room for improvement. I think it can be thicker and darker, but hey, it tasted pretty good, and it's definitely by far the best bowl of tonkotsu that I've done so far. So this is Cole. He's been watching my videos, and it turns out we live on the same island, and so he came over and he hung out and helped me make this ramen. It was actually pretty nice to talk to someone in person about ramen, and I'm sure my wife appreciated the break, so thanks Cole for hanging out, and we'll do a spicy ramen in the future. Thanks so much to Scott LaChapelle and Eric Bentz for all the help with the soup. These guys are pros and great guys, helped me out a ton with this video. Please follow them on Instagram, and also check out Ramen Lord's recipe for this style of tsukemen as well. It's on Reddit. As always, you can follow me on Instagram at WayofRamen, and if you want, you can join our ramen Discord server. There's a bunch of us in there. We're all trying to learn how to make ramen together. It's a lot of fun. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I really do appreciate all the support, and I'll see you all in the next video.